welcome to today's session on Mental Health Matters Courageous Conversations and Sustainable Solutions in the Workplace. My name is Erica Rivera. I'm a member of the Dive-In Mental Health Committee and serving as lead for the Event Management Subcommittee for this particular topic. I am honored to join you today representing Liberty Mutual, where courage comes alive each and every day and is highly connected to our core values of putting people first, making things better, and being open. We believe, like our committee, that by showing empathy and working together, we can help each other and every one of us feel like we belong, thus promoting and nurturing emotional and psychological well being. Our agenda today will be divided into two segments. Now, in the first leg of our journey, you'll hear from industry leaders as they talk about their mental health journey through storytelling. You will hear about challenges faced, obstacles overcome, and the inspiration to carry them through to where we are today. Each journey is unique, arriving at the same place of a courageous vulnerability that allows them to stand before you today to share, to inspire, and to encourage and to learn. Feel free to drop comments or questions in that Q&A box if something resonates with you. Sometimes just hearing the testimony of others serves as a powerful reminder that we are not alone in our circumstance. In the second part of our day, we'll hear from mental health professionals to provide relevant insights to assist each of us in our journey forward. Following this discussion, we'll reserve time for a brief Q&A, so please be sure once again to drop your questions in the chat box. Now, let's get started. Serving as our moderator for today is Zakia Reyes. Zakia is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator at Munich Re, with a special interest in this topic as a graduate of the University of Arizona with a BA in psychology. Over to you, Zakia. Enjoy the discussion.
Thank you so much, Erica, and hello and welcome to everyone joining us. It has been a pleasure to work with our mental health dive-in committee. Each of us have had our own personal experiences and reasons for joining this group, and it spans from people experiencing grief from losing people who are extremely important to them. It goes to experiencing mental health challenges during the pandemic, which so many of us experienced in the past several years, to people who deal with mental illnesses personally themselves. And so it's the intersection of all of these experiences that we decided to put them all together and make the decision to title this Courageous Conversations. It's through the storytelling that we can learn and grow together. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first two speakers, Amanda Benincasa and Parker Koppelman. They're going to share their personal stories, and we'll get the opportunity to ask some more specific questions. And so I'm excited to turn it over to Amanda first to share her story and explain why she feels comfortable sharing it with us today.
Thank you so much. I wanted to thank the Dive-In Committee for having me as a part of this, and thank everybody for being here today, because I think that the more we share these stories, the better off we all actually are in the long run. So today I wanted to share two stories that kind of interweave together and tell about who I am now as a person, but also in juxtaposition to one another. It's two very different stories of mental health and how mental health was received in the workplace. So if I go back 12 years, I was an accountant, and it was December 31st, 2012, which anybody that works in finance or accounting knows is a very, very busy time in finance and accounting. And unfortunately, my father had passed away. And I notified my manager, and the response, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life, was, "I'm really sorry about your loss, but when are you going to do your journal entries?" Verbatim, that's exactly what was said. And at the time, I was extremely young, extremely junior in my career, and said, "Oh, I guess this is what's expected, and I'm just going to go to work. I'm going to put my grief to the side. I'll figure it out later." And unfortunately, what that meant for me was I put my grief to the side for years. Years and years, I just kept working and moving and going through the motions and not really grieving, taking any time to myself to grieve. it actually came up in a number of different instances where even if I had free time where you'd think I'd make space for myself to grieve, I would literally like find a second job so that I didn't have to grieve. I went and bartended on the weekends and I worked at a hookah lounge of all places to make sure that I didn't have to think about the fact that I lost my dad. And I didn't have to think about what that meant for all of the milestones coming down the pathway for me, not having him there. Um, and what that really did was it just deferred it for me. You know, some people, that's exactly what they need in their life. And for them, that's awesome. But for me, it just meant that I was kicking a can down the road. And eventually, what happened is it all came crumbling down, and I was borderline, mental breakdown. I became Team Lexapro and found a way to kind of even myself out and be able to work through this through therapy. But it really resonated with me as an opportunity that I should have taken as a younger person going through grief and didn't have the strength or empowerment to take. So then, fast forward a few years, I was working for Aon where I work now. And my sister, who had Down syndrome, got very ill. And this was pre-pandemic, pre-working remotely. We were all in office, and I had a 4-hour commute round trip every single day. And I messaged my boss and I said, I don't know what to do. I really don't understand. I have no time in my schedule to commute into Philadelphia and be there for my sister. And my mom's alone because my dad had passed away. So, how am I supposed to support my family and support my clients and support everything? And the words I will never forget were, you don't come back until she's okay. And my team meant that. My boss meant that. They covered every client call, every obligation, every client deliverable. It didn't matter if I was in the middle of doing something and a doctor walked in the room. I closed my laptop and I was fully present with my sister. My sister ended up passing away, which was not what was supposed to happen. And I get this wonderful gift from my employer, my boss, and my friend of never regretting those 3 months with my sister. I never have to look back and say, I wish I would have done better for myself because somebody advocated for me. He gave me permission to be there. He gave me permission to actually detach from work and focus on what mattered. And he gave me time, which is something we never get back. And we all know that in our lives. So that gift and kindness that he gave me has actually completely transformed the way I think about work, the way I think about mental health, the way I think about empowering my employees and my colleagues and my friends, and how they approach their working relationship with their job and with their families and everything else. But it's also helped me so much understand where my mental health issues have come from and why Lexapro has become a part of my daily pill taking. But what it's also done is just inspired me to become that person, and to advocate for others and allow them to do the same thing that I was granted by him. So, you know, the reason I want to speak up about it and the reason I can speak up about it is because I've got these two experiences that, when juxtaposed, are completely flip sides of the same coin. One where grief was basically not given to me and I wasn't allowed to take that grieving process, and one where I honestly didn't have to grieve that much because I was so present and so aware of what was going on that I was just really, really calm and present and, I don't know, happy at the end of that situation because I had no regrets left. So now, as a people leader, I take great pride in giving that to everybody that I can and advocating for those that I can. And I'm really happy to get to share that story today because I think it's a really meaningful indicator of how kindness and advocating impacts people for really long periods of their life.
So amazing. And I love how you called it a gift that you were given by your leaders for you to really take that time and spend it with your sister and with your family with no concerns about what would happen at work. And so I think that there are a lot of leaders who would like to model what that leader did for you. So what advice would you give to those leaders to allow their employees to take time to care for themselves and or their family?
I would say the hardest thing about this, and it's something that I think came from my own personal experience, but I think I can impart it on everybody else, is you don't necessarily have to help somebody grieve or force them to do something. I think it's the allowance of the space to do so. An odd situation that came up even this week is an employee that recently went through a loss and came back to work. And I said, you don't have to take your bereavement time, but it's there. And if you want it, I really would love you to. And originally that person said, nope, I'm okay. And then today came back and said, you know what? Actually, I'm going to take this bereavement time. It's really hard. I have this very empathetic part of myself, and it's kind of a little bit of an issue with me from personality perspective, where I want to fix everybody's problems all the time. And I want to dig in and say, here, help, let me help you grieve, or let me help you do this. And as a people manager, that's really not appropriate from my perspective for me to do that, but it is appropriate for me to create the space for that person to share, or that space for the person to take their time. So I would say for all people managers, that's really the most important thing. Is you don't have to understand it, you don't have to fix it. You just have to create the space for people to get through their own things and be accepting of it and non-judgmental.
So true and so important. You had that opportunity the second time around for a manager who gave you that gift, who gave you that space. Um, but what would you have done differently, if that didn't happen? You kind of shared your story and explained how that happened when you were younger. And unfortunately, there are many employees who do not have supportive managers. So, do you have any tips on how they could approach their leaders, how they could handle a situation like the one you dealt with the first time?
Yeah, I would say, my biggest tip for people is you can have advocates within your organization that are not in your direct reporting line. There are a lot of people in HR, whether it's an HR business partner or just an HR generalist, anybody that you've got that you're comfortable sharing with that can help you advocate for yourself. That's why HR is in the position that they're in. That's why they're there as a resource. I would say the same thing of anyone you're comfortable with, even if it's just a peer or a peer of your boss or anybody like that. Anybody that you trust can help you work through it and help you get there. The other thing, and this is just the accountant in me, right? I love the data, and the data side of this says that when people take good care of themselves, the business thrives. There are so many studies on that at this point that show that business thrives with good culture and happy people. So if you're not able to fill your own cup, I speak in cliches all day. I'm a consultant. Fill your own cup before you pour into other people's cups. But if your cup is always on empty, there's just no way for you to be a whole person at work. And from my perspective, we always have to treat our employees as whole people. So we want them to be full all the way to the top, whether it's personal or professional. And I think that kind of dialogue with your manager or HR or anybody that you feel comfortable helping advocate for you is so important.
Totally agree. I often talk about filling your cup uh, all the time, and I never really thought about it as a cliche. So I'm going to keep that in mind moving forward. But you shared so much with us, and I had a couple questions just to dial deeper into what you said. But what's one question that I didn't get the chance to ask that you'd really like to answer for the panel and for the audience?
Maybe not a question, just additional thoughts, right? From my perspective, when we think about leading people and really driving results for our businesses, which is what we all do as people managers, I think often we scurry away from the personal aspects of things. And one of the balancing points that I always have in my career is how to leave myself open for that type of personal interaction with my employees and my colleagues and everybody surrounding me, but also maintain the professionality that's needed so we don't have like an HR complaint going on, right? I don't need that in my life either. And I would say the biggest thing is remembering that we're all here again as whole people. I use that term constantly with my employees and with my colleagues. Whole people are who we want for our organization. And that means accepting all of their great parts and all of their flaws as well. I have a lot of flaws. My virtual background is here to hide the like depressive episode of Amazon shopping that's behind me. It's completely okay. I do admit that to my colleagues, but I wasn't quite ready to show all my Amazon boxes to the world. But I do think that just being an open person as a manager and an open person as a mentor helps, again, create the space for people to admit where they are. And then you can meet them exactly where they are and find success for them throughout their career. That's the biggest thing for me in addressing mental health, is just understanding that within those mental health issues are beautiful flaws that we can unlock for people and show their hidden talents. And that might not look the same for everybody. So being able to unlock that is a really special thing and something that I think we should all focus more on.
I love that. I feel like we're in sync here. I'm forever telling people to be wholly healthy. And
Mhm.
we have such a big focus on physical health, but then there's also mental health, and that's a big part of it. And there's spiritual health, and they're all intertwined. And so allowing people to show up as that whole self, like you're saying, is so important. So I thank you for sharing your story and answering the questions for us, Amanda. And I'm going to now turn it over to Parker to share her story with us.
Great. Thanks, Akia. Um, Thanks everyone for having me. I guess I'll start by saying that even beyond mental health, disability advocacy has been part of my life for a very long time, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And so I was so grateful when I was asked to be part of this panel. And there are a couple ways that disability touches my life. So one is my husband has a significant physical illness um, that was once hidden. It was once not an apparent illness, and so sort of dealing with those challenges. Um, I also have a perspective as his caregiver. And then I also have my own personal experience with mental health. And this last one is obviously the topic of today. But I did want to mention two related things. So, first is obviously mental health challenges can occur by themselves as well, but they can also arise out of other situations like the ones I just mentioned and Amanda mentioned, right? For example, getting diagnosed with or living with a disability is really hard and can take a toll on mental health. Being a caregiver can be really, really taxing, and you may sort of like deprioritize your own mental health in favor of caring for the person you're working with. Um, and then second, anyone at any time for any reason can be impacted by mental health challenges, right? Even if you're not experiencing them now, it's fairly likely over your lifetime, whether it's yourself or a close friend or a family member may struggle with these sorts of things. So I always sort of preface my stories with that, because I think it helps people get into the mindset of like, okay, doesn't necessarily pertain to me right now, but it could in the future. And so my story is that as far back as I can remember, I've had clinical depression, and it's something that I've learned to manage over many years. And I haven't talked much about it in the past, but I don't think it's working. But because by not talking about it, I'm not able to show others that it's okay to talk about it. And so by discussing it now and in other forums I have at work, I hope to normalize it a little bit and take that next step towards destigmatizing it. Um, and over the years that I've lived with this, I've learned a lot about what works for me. And there's no perfect cure all. It's kind of a lot of things that in totality help me to be more effective, like medication, therapy, support from my husband and close friends, and getting enough sleep. And so that's sort of my background story. And then how I sort of tie that into work is that for me, there's a super strong correlation between sleep and my mental health. And so in past roles, I've worked with people all over the world, including, I'd have late evening meetings with people in Asia. And the next morning, I try to block my calendar to the degree possible so I could sleep in a bit, right? It's not always possible. And I know that there are definitely some people, including parents, that do not have this luxury. But in some cases, I was able to, shift a meeting with enough notice. And what I sort of kept taking away, which sort of enabled me to keep doing this and feel okay doing it, was it's not that big of a deal to move a meeting, but it is a big deal that I can make sure that that I'm getting the sleep that I need and taking care of my emotional well-being and bringing my full self to work. I've also been able to use our benefits to support mental health. And I've personally had a good experience, and we have lots of tools and resources. wellness and sleep apps, and as well as our employee resource group, ABLE, that I'm the national co-chair for. And then lastly, I think that my personal mental health experiences have helped me to better empathize with others who are experiencing challenges, even outside of mental health challenges, which I think in turn has made me a better leader. And so I talk about this today and in other forums because I hope that I can show that that this isn't a derailer for someone who wants to be successful, right? As a society, we do not discuss mental health much, and there's a stigma, and it's a huge barrier to getting care, but nothing to be ashamed of. And if you're struggling, of course, it's going to affect how you show up at work, and it's okay to talk about it, right? And I think making progress as a society and as corporations, I think these conversations have to start at the top. And I've just been so grateful that they have happened at the enterprise level with our CEO and other executive leaders, and as all the way down to the sort of individual people leader level, where managers and employees have talked more openly about mental health, either one-on-one or team huddles. And as I mentioned, over the years, I've shared too in a variety of different formats, blog posts, town halls. And what's really powerful about it is that it prompted so many people to reach out to me with their own story. So people don't feel as alone, right? And I just hope that by sharing my story and people feeling less alone, they can employees can be encouraged to take care of themselves and sort of show empathy to others who may be struggling. So I think this is also sort of a call to action for all of the people leaders out there to share stories to the degree you feel comfortable, but also make sure that you're creating an environment where people can bring their full selves to work, and the workplace is safe, psychologically safe, and offers resources and support and is inclusive of people with disabilities. So they can sort of uncover and they feel supported at work. So that's sort of my story. And as one of our former leaders said when we launched our employee resource group a couple years ago, it's okay to not be okay, and it absolutely is. And mental health challenges do not have to be a derailer. You can still have success, and it starts at the top, modeling that for everyone. So thank you for having me and sharing my story.
I love that, Parker. There's so many gems in there that you shared. I think it's amazing that you spoke to medication and therapy. I do therapy every Monday. I think of it like people going to the gym or working out at home or seeing your primary care physician. You have to have that set regimen of things that keeps you wholly healthy, and therapy is definitely one of them. And you shared with us so much of your story, but you also wrote a blog for review for all of the employees in your entire organization. So, what moved you to take such a vulnerable and courageous step to share that so openly?
Yeah, I when we were launching the group, and which is the situation under which I was uh, writing the blog, I was really agonizing over what I would share, because I had shared information about my husband's health quite a bit. I hadn't always, but I'd started talking about it more, and about my role as his caregiver, but I had not ventured into this territory. And I was really going back and forth, like up late thinking about it. And then like one day, all of a sudden, this like wave came over to me. It was like this over me. It was like this wave of clarity when I was like, wait a second, like, no, I have to do this. Right. And I felt really strongly that I want to use my leadership position and visibility, both in my day job and my ERG job, to help people feel less alone, so they can so we can reach leaders too, to help them learn how to support their teams. And so I am a huge believer in, with great power comes great responsibility, and if I don't, who will? And so I did it, and I couldn't take it back. It was out there in the best way.
And that's awesome. And it's true that with great power comes great responsibility. And the sharing that you've done and other people do is really what breaks that stigma. So I think that that's awesome. And you mentioned that you're also an employee resource group leader, Team ERG. I love ERGs, they're super important. So, what made you decide to pursue this extra responsibility in addition to what you were already doing? And how do you go about protecting your mental health in balancing both of the leadership roles?
Yeah. Yeah, I was so excited when this was launching. For many years, as I knew things were sort of in the works behind the scenes, I kept asking my manager at the time, like, "What's the status? What's the status?" Because I was so excited to have this resource. And it sounds really cliche, but I get energy from this work, right? It's technically extra work, but it doesn't feel like that, because helping to create this culture of disability awareness and advocacy is part of being an inclusive leader. And it's all really important to me, and it really fills my cup when people feel seen and heard. I just those It's not every day that you put something out there and you get this flood of just wonderful emails, people sharing their own stories, and it's just incredible, and it sort of creates a snowball effect in a good way. um, and I feel like there's just so much movement we've made, even in a handful of years, as I know many companies have. And it's just so exciting to me. It's not directly mental health related, but very recently we've made some progress on the equity front for physical disabilities. We've replaced some carpeted flooring with some resilient flooring, some hard flooring that's much easier to navigate in a wheelchair. And every time I go on this flooring, I think of it, and I think of, like, wow, that is the huge power of the ERGs, that we were able to get that done and significantly impact people's lives. And then same thing, working with benefits to improve our offerings, whether it's mental, physical well-being benefits. And I mentioned we have apps and PT sessions and all that. Um, it's just, like I said, it's very energizing. I'd also say that, you ask, how do I sort of protect my time, mental health, what have you. I think you have to find what works for you. But I've finally sort of, I think, calibrated what works for me. Um, so a couple of examples. It used to be that if I had to catch up on some emails on a Sunday, let's say, I would say to myself, all right, I'll catch up on emails, and then I will go get coffee with a friend or whatnot. Then I'll do something fun. And inevitably, I would just do the emails, and either I'd get carried away with the emails, or I'd be tired or whatnot, and I never would do the date with a friend. And so I swapped it, and I said, nope, I'm going to do morning coffee, and then I can tackle the emails. So that's sort of like shift in, I guess, prioritization, in some ways, to make sure that I put enough emphasis on the mental health side of things. And then more, I guess, fun things. A couple years ago, I got some cats, and they are very fun. I'm actually surprised they haven't made an appearance yet behind me on the shelf. But the other thing you can see on the shelf behind me is, I'm a huge Lego fan. Everything you see is Lego, except for that stapler. That red stapler is not Lego, but everything else is. And it's a hobby I've discovered in not even through the last 3 years, and it's just such a stress reliever for me. And I love it, and my cats love it too. And so if you were to see the rest of the Millennium Falcon, it's actually in a state of decay because they like climbing on it, but it provides me a lot of stress relief and then amusement as well.
I love that. Finding the things that work for you is so important. And it's amazing that Legos are part of that. And I personally wouldn't have guessed that they were Legos. So I don't know how many other people were surprised by that. But every person is different. I love listening to gospel music throughout the day with my headphones. I'm driving places and I'm singing in the car, and those are the things that keep me mentally healthy. And so I just want to challenge people to really think outside the box and choose what really works for you. There's no normal as to what that is. It's going to be unique, just as unique as you are. So one of the other gems that I heard you talk about was blocking off time, on your calendar. Um, how did you get to the point where you understood that it was not such a big deal to do that, to move a meeting,
Mhm.
but that it is a big deal to prioritize your mental health, like you stated?
Yeah, I thought about it from a number of different angles. I guess the most, maybe the most calculating of which is, I realized that if I was tired, I was just so much less productive. And so, like, the net output or the net productivity was just so poor, right? I thought I was, getting a lot done by staying up really late for the call, getting up early, and getting all this stuff done, but it just wasn't. I wasn't as productive. So I think that, like, taking that step back and realizing that it wasn't good for anyone. Um, And then I'd say the other thing is I have gotten to the point of burnout. And I'm just going to have to say, trust me, it is not a fun place to be. And I think doing everything you can to do things before you get to that point, to help keep you on sort of the path of mental and physical well-being, I think is really important. And having those conversations could be hard, right, with your people leader, for example. And I would say that you can say whatever you feel comfortable with, right? It can be, you can say if you feel comfortable that you're struggling with your mental health, but it could also be something a little bit more vague, like I'm trying to make sure I can give 100% at work. And so I'd like to like shift things around to accommodate that, right? Trying to better manage balance or things like that. So it can be, you can convey sort of your needs without going into anything you feel uncomfortable about. So, but it's hard, right? Like those initial conversations are hard, but I found that once you do them, it is like ripping a Band-Aid off. You just do it.
That's so true. I think there's like an anxiety or overwhelm that builds up when you have to level set or set a boundary in the workplace or even outside of that. But then once you do it and you realize, oh, I'm still alive and like I'm not fired and I still have my job, then it gets easier for you to continue making those choices to protect your mental health, which is so important. And so I want to give you the same opportunity that I gave Amanda with just providing an answer to a question that we didn't get to go over in this time where you shared your story.
Sure. I would say that it's the question would be like, what are our next steps? Like, where do we go from here in terms of our work as companies, as ERGs within our companies? And I would say it really, really is working hard to reduce stigma. And I know something huge to bite off. But one thing that's very, very tangible is I think I'm grateful that the term like taking a mental health day has entered the lexicon and people actually say that, right? Which people would not have said however many years ago, which is great. But I think even with that, I think when people say it, I think people conjure up something that maybe is quite different than, there's a wide range of what that means. And all are valid, right? But I think if taking a mental health day, sort of people conjure up, I'll go, watch Netflix, which is also great. Go apple picking, get a massage, right? All super valid and absolutely ways that people can recharge. But for some other people, it means I'm in a dark room and I cannot get out of bed, right? And so normalizing that it's just as okay for you to say to your people leader, I need to take a mental health day. And that's what that means, as it should be on the same playing field as I ate something that didn't agree with me. I was up all night. I can't come to work, right? And so just that parity of it's just as valid to take some time for your mental health as your physical health. And so I think we need more leaders to support this and have it become more common and less stigmatized.
I totally agree because they're so intertwined. Because if your mental health is declining, so is your physical health. And so you need days off for both of them. Super thankful for you, Parker and Amanda, for sharing your stories. And we're going to transition now to the mental health professionals part of our segment. And I'm going to first introduce Cathy to tell us about your professional background and a little bit about your personal story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I'm about to describe my diagnoses, and one of them is ADHD. So I've been sitting for over an hour, people. I can do this, though. I think I'm doing great. I think I'm doing great. My name is Cathy Gatlin. I run a company called Improv for the number 4health.com, which does comedy improv, but focused on mental health. My personal background slash journey is I have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder only last year. I'm 51, so obviously a little bit of a late diagnosis, as well as ADHD. Um, I actually work at a company called McGraw-Hill. It's American, so you guys might have heard of it, a publisher. So I do the improv on the side, and I've had to take 2 short-term leaves. And, you know, we talk a lot about stigma, and I was really nervous my first time to talk about needing to go on a leave. Um, so for people to understand just really quickly, bipolar is, you're either there's times where you're really up and you can do anything, and I can run 5K in 23 minutes, and I'm not in that kind of shape, but I did it once. 25 minutes, but still. And then there's times of horrible depression where you are struggling a lot. So I think, for me, when I took those 2 leaves, it was really interesting to see the different reactions of people. Because some people are like, yeah, you take your time, it's going to be okay. And then there's other people who are more critical in terms of taking the time. So I think, I think part of my job as someone with bipolar is to remind these people, you wouldn't say that to someone with cancer, right? You wouldn't say, hey, get better quicker, get better, in a time frame that I expect you to get better in. So I think that, um, I work really hard at kind of reframing the way people talk. And obviously I do that in a silly, jokey way because that's my personality. But I hope that I'm able to communicate to people how important it is. Depression is pretty terrible, right? I always say to people, I would rather give birth than have a day of depression, right? If anybody's given birth, like, depression is pretty bad. So I think, we can't. And I think sometimes we in society are like, well, it must be really sad day, and you're like, no, 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 this is like a clinical, actual thing, right? This is for real. So yeah, I guess, I consider my job kind of communicating to people the severity and intensity of mental health. So yeah, that's I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no, you definitely did, and I appreciate you being open and vulnerable and speaking to the severity of depression, because I do think that there are times where people see it as maybe there's just a day or a couple days or a week where you're feeling sad, and they don't understand how crushing it can be, and that you can't get out of bed, or maybe you can't shower, or you can't take care of yourself or others. And so I applaud you for sharing and opening up about that. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Jen, for you to tell us about your professional background and share a little bit about your personal story as well.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Jen Dibnah, and I've been teaching for about 25 years, and I started when I was about 16. But I also grew up in a home where I'll tell you a little bit more about the mental health side. I grew up in a home with a mom who had bipolar or has bipolar disorder, and other things as they do. And so I experienced firsthand, somebody really suffering with mental illness. And at the time, there wasn't as much information as there is now, unfortunately. And I watched her. Yep, she's an amazing, amazing woman, fighter, warrior, as we all know. I think all of us are with any kind of mental health issues, that you really have to advocate for yourself. And she's absolutely a true warrior. And but it also made me a very empathic person, and to be able to read people, and to read people's energy in a sense, and pick up on things that perhaps somebody else wouldn't, who had the same experience. So that was my real gift in having a mom with a severe mental illness, which took me a long time to discover. But that is really truly the gift, and it helps me now to coach women worldwide, how to be better leaders, how to manage big shifts in their lives, and to really embody the whole person that they are. And it's my absolute passion and purpose to watch women transform from being stuck or overwhelmed, or with some kind of mental health issue, and they come out really understanding themselves and able to go forth and achieve their goals and become even more of the person that they originally were. So that is my little blurb, my background.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's so needed for people to really discover who they are. And I think often if you're going through and living a life where you're not living your life of who you are, that can contribute to a decline in your mental health as well. And
Mhm.
so it's important for people to do the work, and it's awesome that you are an advocate and you come alongside people to do the work with them. So both you and Cathy got the chance to hear the stories from Amanda and Parker. And so, Cathy, I want to give you the first question on this. Um, how do we create a space capable of supporting and caring for the infinite possibilities and circumstances where we can all win and grow? So, what's your professional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. I loved the term infinite possibilities. Wow, that's awesome. I'd say listening to people without judgment is really important. I'd say, allowing for differences. I'll give you an example. I've been doing my job, my day job, for 22 years. Been working at McGraw Hill, and I can't sit, as I said, I can't sit for long periods of time. So I was at a sales meeting. I'm in sales, and I used to get coloring book and color during the sales meetings. And then there was people, it was interesting because there was people who were like, "What are you doing? You shouldn't be allowed to do that." And I was like, "I have a hard time focusing, so this helps me focus." So, it's just kind of, it's allowing for those differences. Hey, it's okay. You're like, you're doing your thing. And you know what? I'm actually participating a lot more than most people in the room. So it is keeping me engaged in part of it. Right. So I think allowing for those differences, and listening is really important. I mean, if I was to tie this back into improv, I've learned so much in improv to like be silly and play and not judge. And I think that in work, it would be great if we had opportunities where we actually were silly and did some play, right? Like where, and maybe that's as simple as I've decided I'm going to, dance. I'm going to get up and dance for 5 minutes during between my work, like something silly and different where you're like, I don't know, you're just thinking outside of yourself.
I
Yeah,
love
that's,
that.
thanks.
It's important. My son, he is on the autism spectrum, and so he can't sit still for long periods of time either. And so I'm hopeful that he enters the workforce and is in an organization that supports it and lets him color or do something
Mm,
else that he needs to get, his energy out. And I love dancing. I don't know that
mm,
people would be happy to see me just get up and dance at work, but I can say that at home, especially in the summer when I'm working from home and my children are, that I'll take dance breaks with my daughter. And
I
that
love that.
definitely contributes
Yeah.
to my mental health and to her mental health. So I think that that is a great option for people to start thinking about
Mm.
how they can incorporate. And Jen, I'll give you that same question and see if there's anything that you have to add.
I would add that as far as both sides winning and having infinite possibilities, that when a company supports their people perform for them better, right? When you feel valued and not just with benefits and pay, when you actually feel like you're valued as a whole person, and if it's a quirk or whatever, you're coloring during a meeting, but you perform really well, it shouldn't matter. And so I feel like that would be, yeah, I think that, when we see people, it was Amanda who said, when we see, each other as whole people, we're not just high performing executives or leaders. We are mothers, we are daughters, we are sisters, friends, etc. And every single one of us has some kind of mental health something. By the time we're 40, they say that we'll have at least two major mental health issues, and so it affects all of us. And yeah, anyways.
I think that that's great, and it's important. And so I'm with you here, Dan, and so I'm going to give you this question first. When creating a safe environment, where is the line between professional and personal in the workplace?
This is a newer age belief, but my opinion is that it really starts with relationships. It starts from the get-go. It starts from the interview process of, here is how we plan if somebody has a mental health issue. Same if you have diabetes and you get diagnosed with diabetes, and this is how we treat you as a whole person. And so it really starts from the leader of the pack being a whole person themselves and leading by example. And truly communicating support without the pressure. So, okay, I can, I've noticed that you're not at your desk the last 3 days. Is there something going on that need support for? Or, that, you can, and of course, choose. I've heard nightmare stories about people. Actually, my mom, who was put in a child's chair in front of two large chairs, and she was spoken down to when she was struggling with her with an episode. And she felt so just uh, small, right? She had no power, and the way that they managed the whole thing was just it's so demeaning, right? And so really treating people with dignity, not taking away their power and their the things that they love at work. This is another thing I've heard, is that if you say I'm really struggling, often the old school way is to take away all of the things that might be heavy, but you're not asking the person as a whole person what they need. And people often know what they need, and that could just be time off. It could just be, I need to come in later for the however long. I need more support. I need somebody to take on this. And so it's really about having an open dialogue and seeing people as whole people, and keeping the support there without the pressure of having to tell too much or divulge information that you don't want to. But really, yeah, I always come back. I love that Amanda said that. And it seems to be the theme, really, is that we're whole people. We're not just high achieving employees.
Yeah, that's so important. I can't imagine having gone through what your mother went through in an experience like that in a time where you need uh, more empathy and kindness, and then to have it um, be in lack is horrible to experience. I'm going to turn the same question over to you, Cathy, to see if you have anything to add to Jen's statements.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jen just hit it right on the head. I mean, obviously, it has to be talked about in the same types of ways you would physical disabilities, right? But I think, it's interesting because sometimes there's people at work, particularly customers that I have, as opposed to people. I find the sales reps are most of them are fairly open, but some of my customers, I actually ask ahead of time, are you comfortable if I talked about my mental health? And there's been a couple times people said no, and I need to respect that, right? I mean, part of me is frustrated that they say that because of that is the stigma right there, right? But I think you also have to respect that people are in a different place on the journey. And I think you know I think was it Parker, I think, was talking about the importance of our leaders. Like, if our leaders spent more time talking about mental health, that would make a huge difference. It's one thing for me to do this at my level of things, but if CEOs were getting up and talking about it, or C-suite type situation, I think that's big, because I mean, we can't deny the fact that people on the C level really set a tone for the company, right? So I think that and I think that it's upper, very, like, the upper management that also creates the culture of openness or not openness. So yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I think that's something that's really, really important, is that it's talked about at high up.
I agree. I think that it sets the tone for everyone at the top, and it flows down. But something that I'm such a big believer of is that there's a difference between managers and leaders. And so you can be a manager of people and lead in that way. And so in those times where you're that person, you definitely want to show empathy and kindness and lead. But even people who are individual contributors, you don't have a team, there's no one reporting into you, you can still be a
Mm.
leader of empathy and kindness, and level set for the things, that are acceptable and not acceptable within the teams and departments that you work in. And so that's just something that I want to stress to people, is that even if you're not seeing the leaders around you do that, you can be that leader or
Good
that
point.
person
That's a really
for
good point.
someone else. And so
Yeah.
I want to give a question over to Jen about psychological safety, because I feel like that's so important and something that's coming up more in the workplace. I definitely love when I hear it, but I'm hoping you can speak to the relationship between psychological safety and mental health.
I think it really comes down to trust. So again, building the relationship with, if it's not somebody, in my own experience, when I went to a new company, it was actually one that I burnt out from because I was not supported and the promises weren't kept that were originally promised in the beginning. And I ended up in this position where I felt ashamed and disappointed in myself, of course, and like it was my fault, but it was actually because there was broken trust. And I feel like once you've broken the trust in your, when you're working for somebody, it's very difficult to get back. So creating the trust right from the get-go with somebody who's a leader, and having that, like Amanda has, I keep coming back to Amanda, but because your personality is similar to mine, and that you are an empathic person, right? So you just kind of, you not fix it, but you want to be there with them. And so psychological safety, though, obviously, there's boundaries there, but to right from the get-go, right from the interview, you have a plan. What if you can ask the person, what happens if you're not doing well? How do you manage that? Open up the door and say, I'm taking a mental health day. Say that this is absolutely part of our culture, and you don't even have to say it's a mental health day. You just say it's a personal day if you're not quite there yet. And also, though, talking about experiences and not necessarily the open wounds, but the scars can really help people. And I think, Parker, the way that you shared with you wrote the blog and shared with everybody so boldly, create psychological safety. And the importance of that, of course, is that, again, we're whole people. I'll keep repeating this over again, but that when people feel valued, they're going to, of course, and feel safe to share, they're going to show up differently. Um, and so, yeah, I think over the next few years, we're going to see a big shift in the stigmatization of mental health because things like this are happening. But also since COVID, there's been a big shift, which is great. And like you, I hope that my kids will also grow up, being more supported by their leaders. So.
Definitely. I think that's great. I've never thought about setting that groundwork when people come in to ask them what that looks like and how they can be supported. So I've taken a mental note of that. In my previous position as a manager, one of the things that I always did with level setting for my employees was to let them know that, like, I personally do not enjoy driving when there's anything falling from the sky. So, like, there's snow or rain or hail or anything like that, please know that I'm okay with you working from home because I will not be in the office. And so it lets that level set, it kind of takes away the fear, like, oh, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to push myself past some type of comfort to get to work and be seen as a valid employee. And so I feel like people can breathe and not worry. Um, and I think you just talked about taking it a level up to, ask them specifically, how I can support them, which is amazing. Um, Cathy, I want to give you the chance to answer the question too about psychological safety and mental health. I think you're on mute.
How many years have we been doing this? I think that, this is a tough one for me because I, I feel like depending on your diagnosis, well, I think depending on any, like, people can get a little freaked out when you give your diagnosis, like, oh, I've actually had someone take a step back, physically take a step back, a customer, when they asked why I was off leave and I said I have bipolar, right? Because if somebody asks me why I'm on leave, I'm going to tell them the truth. So, and she took a step back, and I had to make a joke and say, this isn't catching. You're not going to catch this, right? Like, I think you know, sometimes, I know this sounds odd, but sometimes you have to create your own psychological safety, right? Where I have to remind myself, hey, you're a good person. You have a lot of really great things about you, and it's okay that this person just did it. And have the people around you that you could connect with, your community, right? I mean, so much of this is making sure you don't feel left left alone, right? So much of this is of having your people that you can check in with, right? And call and say, hey, this really weird thing just happened. Can I check in with you? Like I'm feeling a bit thrown, right? So I think that my community, I've, found my people that I feel very safe with, that I can be myself around with. And when I'm in a situation where I don't feel safe, I usually call the person out on it, and say, I don't, I don't like what you just said. So I think that, yeah, I guess in terms of creating psychological safety, I'd say the two things are community and creating community around you. And number two, not letting someone bring you down.
I
Yeah.
think that those are really two great things. Community is so important. And like you said, you need those safe spaces. And I think there's a large focus on creating those safe spaces outside of the workplace, but you need those safe spaces in the workplace too. And so it's important to build those relationships. Maybe you've had a tough meeting or you experienced something like you experienced of someone stepping back, and you don't want to have to wait until the end of the day to find a safe space to talk about that. There should be someone that you can go to within your workplace, to talk through and work through that, and then be able to, finish out the rest of the day as your best self. And so I'm glad that you spoke to that. Um, Jen, I want to ask you to kind of speak on community. That's something that Cathy brought up. So what are your thoughts on that and contribution?
Yes. So, and another question, there's a question about how can individuals look after themselves and what to do if they start to see or feel that their mental health is declining. And one of the things that I suggest is to have a community, and whether that is at work or not. If you're a new employee, you may not have a community, but have somebody that you can talk to. And if there is not nobody that you can talk to, get your feelings out on paper, journal, move your body so that you're not sitting in it. And Amanda and Parker, I know that you can both relate to shoving it down, right? And just like, I'm good, I'm just going to keep going. And well, you can probably all relate to this, but specifically with your stories, that if you defer the pain, if you're feeling something and you know that something is not quite right and you defer it, it's going to come out sideways. And I've seen it, with everybody of every age, that if you stuff things down, it always comes out some way. So whether that is a major mental, breakdown, or all of a sudden you have to go on medication or something like that, but creating a community inside your company may not be possible, but having a community outside and actually taking the action to build it for yourself. So go out and join a book club, or if you want to build a community at work, start like a walking club where you maybe take 2 minutes at the beginning of the walking club and you get all the crap out. And I call this empty the bucket. You just, let it flow. And then 2 minutes is up, everybody's kind of griped and complained, and then you move on to ideas and gratitude, or things that you're looking forward to, or vacations or whatever, so that it's not like it becomes a healthful place to be, where you can, you're allowed to complain and dump, and then you don't spend the whole walk doing that, and you can have steps challenges. And I loved how Cathy said about playing, right? When we play, we learn better. When we play, we become children again. And so many of us, I know I could ask all of you, when was the last time you did what you used to love doing as a child? Whether it's art, horseback riding, riding a bike, whatever, it really brings out that joy. And when you are paper pushing or in front of a screen for hours on end, and I don't know how many hours you spend at work, but if you were to incorporate play from a leadership role, and do the dance party, or do something like bingo, or on a Friday afternoon or something, so that people can feel like they're a part of something. And then things like, having a stocked fridge so that people will go in and have, healthy snacks together or whatever. And just opening up the idea that work can be really fun and playful, and not just just somewhere where you come and you're data driven and all the all the stuff that you do, all the amazing things that you do with your skills. So yeah, and then of course I truly feel like having something to look forward to outside of work is really important, so that you don't just feel like this monotonous cycle of you work, you go to work and you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and it's exactly the same, like Groundhog Day. So make things that are important to you a priority, and prioritize self-care, and get people involved.
Yeah, it's so true. I'm loving the thought and the theme of play that we're hearing here. More and more, I'm seeing teams do things together outside of the office, which I think really helps build those relationships. So, like doing escape rooms together. I remember the first week that I started with the company that I have, there was an escape room event that we did, and I was like, oh, I'm never leaving here. And 8 years later, and I'm still here with the company, it's really important for you to create those times to play together. And it looks different sometimes as adults, but it really builds those relationships. And so then when you are doing the work, you're pushing the paper, you're doing the sales or things, like you have this relationship that helps you with your collaboration. So that's really, really important to focus on and to think of. Um, One of the things that I have heard over the past several years is about mental health first aid. And so I just wanted to see if either of you, Cathy, Jen, have heard of that, have any statements or opinions on that.
I have heard about it, and I do feel like it needs to be updated. Actually, my mom did it, and we were just talking about this on a walk the other day, and she said, "Oh, it's kind of a joke, unfortunately. Like it needs a lot of updating for what's act like." Amanda and Parker get into that, like really, because we need people who actually understand, not just people who have educated themselves on what mental health is or whatever. People who have experienced it and what that looks like in for you and for every company of course looks different as well, right? So the whole culture, but to yes, it's there, but it needs a lot of help.
Got it. Thank you. And Cathy, give you the opportunity to comment as well.
I don't really know much about mental health, I'll be honest, so I can't really comment on it. I mean, I'm excited that there there's things like that happening, because obviously that means people are caring more, but I can't speak to the specifics.
No, no worries. And thank you for both of you sharing just your professional opinions and thoughts on mental health and answering some of the questions that we had here for the panel. But I am going to take the opportunity now to turn it over to Shakira, who is going to lead in our open Q&A for the audience. I know that we had a couple of questions come through, but you may have just been sitting and absorbing. So now is the chance for anyone in the audience to open up their questions to with anyone here on the panel. So I'll turn it over to you, Shakira.
Thank you, Zakia. We do have a few questions that have been submitted, so I'm going to start with those. And maybe I want to open this up to either Amanda or Parker. Both of you mentioned today your personal issues and losses. So with that, there's typically the rush for people to say to get over it, which is really a quest to help them feel better about interacting with you. How do you allow yourself the grace and understanding to put your needs first rather than letting societal pressures push you to do otherwise?
I'm happy to take a crack at it first, give my
Sure.
perspective. Um, this is a tough one because I think it's how do you live in a world, whether it's in work or otherwise, where people are the way they are, right? And we want society to change, and we want to destigmatize, and we want people to be educated, but what happens when it's not, right? And we want to make the progress, but it's not there yet. um, I think something that I've realized is sometimes, and this may sound counterintuitive, but sometimes you just sort of, I found that if I just sort of accept that and find other outlets and just sort of like meet those people where they are and leverage other people to sort of like talk through things. So as an example, if there are folks in your life, work or personal or whatnot, that are sort of like pushing you to get over it, they may not be people that you should, you talk about some of those things with, right? And maybe you have to, again, it depends on how you approach things, but maybe you just sort of let things go, and then you reach out to all these people over here that are more understanding. And it could be a confidant, it could be a spouse, it could be a therapist, it could be a best friend. I found that sort of having like select confidants where I don't have to pretend that everything is fine is very freeing. Whereas if you put on a mask and pretend with everyone that everything is fine, that's just a recipe for disaster. But if you have like a select few confidants, especially if you have someone in the workplace who sort of knows the workplace and can be sort of your personal confidant in that way, it can be really helpful.
Thank you for that, Parker. I definitely agree that we should meet people where they are, and knowing who you can depend on definitely helps the process. Um, Amanda, did you have anything to add?
I completely agree with Parker. The only thing I'll add is every time I think about giving myself grace, I think about holding that mirror up and giving it back. So maybe the person who wants you to get along with it isn't comfortable themselves and it's making them experience something. So give them the grace as well. It doesn't mean you have to push your problems under the carpet. It just means, to Parker's point, find your people, find the ones that you can give that to that are ready for it, and don't push it on everybody, just as you wouldn't want it pushed on you. So I think it's just about receiving grace and also giving it, which I know is really hard when we're hurting, but it's a beautiful thing if you can find the space for both.
I like that. Then we have a few more questions. Some of us has heard the phrase before, one size does not fit all. How does that tie into our discussion here today? And what does that mean to you?
I think I can jump in and hand it back to you, Parker. But for me, this is really all about the approach. It's about creating space. And it goes to the point that I made about I will always want to fix everybody. Not everybody wants to be fixed. Not everybody needs to be fixed. Some people want to wear, that it's a beautiful art, right? In Japan, where a piece of porcelain cracks and you fill it with gold, and they celebrate the cracks rather than trying to hide the cracks and throwing it away. Some people, their issues become this beautiful part of who they are. I feel that way about myself. And I think that's part of the one size does not fit all. Some people want to embrace it, some people want to hide it. Parker, you said some people want to squash it down and some people want to let it out. And I think that's actually a beautiful thing about humanity. But being accepting and non-judgmental, I think, is exactly what everybody needs to create this space to have their approach fit there.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think the idea also of trying stuff out, whatever that means, whether that's a coping skill or a person, right? Try something on with a person, and then pivot if it doesn't work out. So I think it's hard. It can be trial and error, which is really challenging and exhausting, but it is worth it. I promise.
Yes, I agree. I like that, especially what Amanda said. It's like bringing your whole self. The thing that you said earlier with respect to, the Amazon packages behind you, even though you didn't want to show it, you still share like, this is who I am and these are my things. And same with Parker, like the Legos behind me, this is who I am and these are my things. So again, showing up wholly. Let's see, we have some more questions. What best practices, and I guess we can do this with Cathy or Jen, what best practices would you suggest to balance psychological safety with an employee's privacy?
So again, going back to the relationship, building the relationship and having the support with, like, communicating support without the pressure. And I think this is I think where we could really improve things, because there are certain companies or organizations where you go to HR and they're more concerned about the bottom line than the people. And so when we, going forward, let's think about the whole person and people rather than the bottom line, so that because when we think about the people and when we value the whole person, of course, the company will actually benefit. And there's like Amanda said, there's tons of statistics about this as well. But it's really about finding, as an employee, finding the people that you can trust. And I would love to, in every organization, that the original interview talks about, this is our plan when something, doesn't feel right for you, or, if your mental health starts to decline, or, you have a plan already set out. And then there are third party, not necessarily HR in the company, but third party contractors who, will train leaders how to identify what the signs are of what, mental health might look like. And then they can go to that person and say, hey, I've noticed that, you haven't been at your desk on time the last, few days, or you've been late for meetings, or you've been making a lot of mistakes. And that's so unlike you. And, you're a valued person here. We just want to make sure that you're okay. And know that, as we stated in the interview process, that this is the plan, right? So there's a plan, it's communicated, you give it to them, and then they advocate for themselves. And the leaders are also showing that it's okay to take days, or, sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's a complete break, like Cathy mentioned, taking like a stress leave kind of a thing, where where you're still part of the company, you're not pushed out, and you're able to come back. So and of course, it's in advocating for yourself, you can share as much as you like as the employee, and there should never be a pressure there from management to say why you're taking a mental health day, or just like you wouldn't give all the symptoms that you're dealing with a flu.
Thank you. And Cathy, did you have anything to add?
I did, yeah. I think this is a really interesting question, because I mean, we're obviously, everybody in this panel is super open, really great with mental health. I mean, a lot of like great energy, right? But we have to deal with the reality that there are people that are not, and they might be managing people. So I'm thinking of someone specifically at our company. Like, I'm obviously very forthright in terms of my diagnosis. So I will actually have people text me and call me and say, I don't know if I'm doing well. What should I do? And, obviously I'll point them towards EAP, but employee assistance plus stuff. But if they sound really not good, I might say something like, hey, maybe you need to go to your doctor, you need to go to stress leave. Okay, could you walk me through that process? I'm like, yeah, and I wouldn't talk to your manager about it. I go directly to this person. Like knowing who it is that you can talk to, and not that you don't always have that luxury, right? But I mean, in an ideal world, who the people are who are the advocates and can help you in your journey.
Yes, definitely. I agree. You should know who your advocates are, and helping you in your journey. Um, so I have some other questions. One of them is, and it kind of goes on to what Cathy said, but I wanted possibly Amanda or Parker to harp on this one. Um, what do you say to people that are afraid to even share, not necessarily their whole story, but just even an inkling of what's going on with them, but it clearly affects their day to day?
So from my perspective, I go back to just creating the safe space. There's some people that will never be comfortable sharing any inkling of what's going on with them, because we've grown up in a society where this was just not necessarily something you were supposed to share. It used to be something that was really hush hush. So there are generational differences at play in this workplace that are really, really opposite when it comes to sharing any type of mental health struggle. I think it's fine if people just say, I need a day. If they need a week, if they need a leave of absence. I never dig too deep if they don't want to give it to me, because you want to respect the fact that it's enough for them to even come and say, I need to take time. So I try to just celebrate anybody advocating for themselves without feeling like I have to pry information out of them. If I've created the space that they feel okay sharing in, that's something to absolutely celebrate in addition to. But I think celebrating people advocating is just enough. And everybody should be proud of anybody doing that and should be proud of themselves for creating their ability to do that as well.
I like that, the celebrating the avocation of for yourself and others. Um, what about you, Jen? I'm sorry, Parker.
Uh, yeah, I would say the thing I'd add on to that is whether it's like if it's an employee coming to a leader about it, don't feel like you have to do it all in one sitting either, or you can sort of like talk about it in bits and pieces, as Amanda said, in as much or as little detail as you want. So just not feeling like, oh, this is like my one shot and I've got to get it perfect. And like, yeah, you want like think about it and think about what you feel comfortable sharing, but don't feel like it has to be perfect or sort of a one and done. If you feel better, if it feels more authentic and easier for you to do it, sort of, have a couple of briefer chats.
Got it. And Jen, I have a question for you. In regard to those in leadership or management roles, what are the steps we can take today to start the conversation in our organizations regarding better mental health in the workplace?
Hmm. Well, like the Parker did, and sharing blogs, and then it would be wonderful if the leaders could, or everybody chimes in on it and says, yeah, I've been there, or yeah, I'm going to take it's part of the conversation. And to not there's such a huge shame around it, and so part of creating the psychological safety too is to not shame people. And if you don't understand, ask questions. Okay, so you have bipolar disorder, what do you do when you're having an episode? What does that look like for you? How is it going to impact your, the way that you perform, or the team, or whatever? And of course we have to think about how it actually affects the company if you're taking weeks off, or time off, or whatever. And so how can you as leaders start again from the beginning? And it can be, the beginning can be now, right, where you all of a sudden start talking about it and you shift the culture. And so I had an idea actually, and I'm not sure if this would fly, but wouldn't it be awesome if on Monday mornings, or the first day that you come in, you do a mental health check-in with everybody? Like it's if you have 250 employees, if you have 40 employees, it's like, I'm a 1 out of 10 today. And you don't have to say what's going on, but people will be like, oh, okay, maybe she needs some more support. And or you could choose not to say anything. But wouldn't it be cool if we could just be like, yeah, I'm having a crappy day, like and or my dog died, or I'm dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's, or whatever. Like it's not just bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety. It's living with aging parents, or you've got a kid at home who has a neurodivergence or a mental illness, or you have it can be anything. It could be somebody just died in your life. And so it doesn't have to be somebody's diagnoses. It can just be like, all of a sudden, I don't know how to cope anymore, and I can be the leader of the company, and that happens to me. And it has to really start with an understanding of no shame, no judgment. We are humans. We are all here having a human experience. Nobody knows what we're doing, right? And that to support each other and go, oh, I've just noticed that you're not yourself, or you're hiding in your office more, or you look like you've been crying. Are you okay? It can be so simple to pass somebody in the hallway and go, oh, hi, I haven't met you yet, I'm so and so, like, how are you? And ask them, like, how are you? Really look in somebody's eyes, and not just, oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, hey, yeah, whatever, and put your head back down and work again. It's like, how are you really? And obviously, that's to everybody's comfort, but we're very stuck in our screens, and that's okay too, as far as communication. If you need to email or text somebody, I'm really not doing well, I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting help, or this is my plan, or whatever. I may need an assistant for the next few months or something, so that I can and it becomes a bigger conversation. But it really starts from opening up, no shame, no judgment.
I like that. I definitely like the setting check-ins. I think it's helpful. And sometimes, like you said, it may not be an actual diagnosis. Sometimes even our work itself affect us. So the check-ins are useful. And I'm going to kind of switch it up a little bit, because I actually have a question for Zakia. And so one of the questions that we have is, how do you keep from feeling guilty about random struggles with mental health when it's been 3 years since I've lost my dad and 2 years in January that I lost my mom. But with the stress of work and life, these overwhelming feelings come back randomly.
So I would say we personally, as people, put timelines on when we think we should be past a season of grief. Um, and there really isn't any timeline for that. And so for some people, it may take them 6 months and then they seem like they're back to 100%. And for other people, it could take a decade. But when we lose someone, especially parents, who gave us life and who raised us and who were our lives. And it could have been awesome relationships that we had with parents, or our parents could have passed and we didn't yet get to have the relationships that we wanted to have with them. It brings so many feelings that it is perfectly okay and normal for years down the road, for you to still be working through some of them. And I talked earlier about therapy, and I will be in therapy for life. I don't need there to be something going on. I could be in my therapy session celebrating that everything is great. And it could be years down the road where I'm talking through whatever season I'm in at the moment. But I would say therapy is really good with helping you work through some of the things that maybe you're not able to work through on your own, because we're so close to it. And they do a good job of helping us see ourselves in ways that we're maybe not used to. And so I'll say I'm sorry for your loss, and to give yourself some grace and just accepting that it's okay that these things come up. We are reminded of things all the time, as we go through the world, of people, of shows, of movies, of events. Um, and so you're going to be reminded of your parents, and there might just be some pain that comes up with that as you're still grieving, but it's a process, and I would say don't rush yourself through that process.
I like that, mainly because one for me, I lost my dad maybe about a year and a half ago, and recently I had an event where the pain kind of resurfaced. So I totally understand. Like again, you have to give yourself grace. We're going to take one more question, and the question is both for Amanda and Parker. And what is the most impactful thing someone did or said to you that helped you in a tough mental spot?
That's a big one. It's a good one. But um, I think so. One thing that happened to me was I was going through a hard time and needed to take a little bit of time off from work. Um, and it was just just a some like unexpected but brief time off. And my people leader at the time sort of knew that I was in a rough spot, and obviously knew that I loved Lego. And a couple days after I said, hey, I need to take a little bit of time away. A couple days later, a Statue of Liberty Mutual Lego showed up on my doorstep. And it was a like small just acknowledgement of like, yep, I got you, you know take the time you need. And yeah, it's over there. And so it's just a nice it was a nice symbol of like support, I guess.
Yes, being seen is important. What about you, Amanda?
I would say from my perspective, I love that. I got into Lego, by the way, during the pandemic, but I have like these talon claws and it doesn't go well. So I just end up frustrated and angry the whole time. But I love that for you, Parker. I would say the most meaningful thing that I've ever heard is just I'm something along the lines of, I might not understand, but I support you. That's super meaningful because it doesn't ring hollow. It doesn't, it's not somebody saying, I totally get it, or don't worry about it, everything will be fine. I'm not a fan of that whatsoever, but just saying, I might not get what you're going through, but I'm going to support you through it is so, so meaningful. And it still rings true every time I hear it. And it still is one of my favorite things to hear.
So it seems like the general topic or the general consensus is make sure that everyone is seen. But that's pretty much the end of our conversation today. I want to thank Amanda Parker for continuing to be vulnerable by sharing your stories. It reminds us that despite our story, we can still be successful and thrive in our careers. Thank you to Cathy and Jen for providing your expertise. Despite mental health often being the silent thing in the workplace we don't often speak of, we've learned that it continues to be an important topic. As Amanda mentioned, it isn't about work-life balance. We are who we are when we present ourselves at work in totality. We have to make sure that we are okay when we show up to work because it benefits the team and the company. When the people are wholly healthy, the business thrives. It is our hope that this conversation ignites the further conversations about mental health and provides corporations with some tools to create an environment that is psychologically safe and is flexible to the mental needs of employees. We also want to remind you to advocate for yourself. We would like to thank our global and local sponsors. Special thank you to the Dive-In Committee and all who worked behind the scenes to have this discussion and make it work. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and we thank you all for your courage. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.